The courtroom was so silent that even the ticking of the clock on the wall felt too loud. Every pair of eyes was fixed on the young woman standing in the witness box, her hands trembling, her face pale, and her voice breaking with every breath. The billionaire's daughter, Amelia Hartwell, had just shattered the illusion of a perfect family. Her words cut through the tension like glass shattering on marble. "My stepmother killed my father, not the maid." For a moment, no one moved. Reporters froze, pens suspended in midair. The judge's gavel stayed still. The cameras, flashing seconds earlier, went dead silent, as if even they couldn't process what they had just heard. Just hours ago, everyone had expected a routine verdict. The housemaid, Maria, had been on trial for months, accused of murdering her wealthy employer, Richard Hartwell, a man known for his business empire and quiet generosity. The evidence, at least on paper, had seemed strong. Fingerprints on the glass, her DNA on the weapon, and a string of text messages that made her appear desperate for money. The case had captivated the media. The story of a maid allegedly betraying the family that employed her was tragic enough. But what no one expected was that the family's only daughter would stand up in court and accuse her own stepmother of a murder. As the words left Amelia's mouth, a collective gasp rippled across the courtroom. Sitting at the defense table, Maria's eyes widened in disbelief. Her hands, callous and worn from years of cleaning, covered her mouth as tears welled up. She had maintained her innocence from the very beginning, but few had believed her. Now, for the first time, it seemed that someone who mattered, was finally speaking the truth. Across the room, seated with perfect posture in her tailored black suit, Victoria Hartwell didn't flinch. Her expression remained calm, her lips pressed in a polite line, her eyes sharp and calculating. She was the kind of woman who could control a room without saying a word. For years, the media had called her the Ice Queen of the Hartwell estate. She had married Richard just a year after his first wife died in a car accident, and whispers about her motives had never really stopped. Some called her ambitious. Others said she was dangerous. But no one had ever been able to prove anything, until now, perhaps. Order. Order in the court. The judge finally barked, banging the gavel repeatedly. But the damage was already done. The truth, or something that looked very much like it, had escaped into the open. Outside the courthouse, hundreds of reporters crowded the steps, broadcasting every second live. The Hartwell name had always attracted attention, but this scandal was different. This was betrayal, wealth, and death wrapped into one. The perfect story. The headlines had already begun writing themselves. Billionaire's daughter turns on stepmother in shocking testimony. But beneath the chaos, behind the polished cameras and sensational headlines, lay something much deeper, a web of secrets stretching back years, tangled in love, greed, and guilt. For Amelia, this wasn't about the money or the fame. This was about justice. For her father, for Maria, and perhaps even for herself. She remembered that night vividly. The echo of breaking glass. The sound of her father's voice raised for the first time in years. The shadow she saw moving through the hallway just before she heard the scream. Everyone said she was too distraught to remember details clearly, that her grief had blurred her judgment. But Amelia had seen something she could never forget. Richard Hartwell had built his empire from nothing. He wasn't born into wealth. He created it. People admired him not only for his success, but for his integrity. He had started as a mechanic's son, worked his way through college, and built one of the largest tech companies in the country. To the world, he was a symbol of perseverance. To Amelia, he was just Dad, the man who taught her how to ride a bike, how to balance a checkbook, and how to treat everyone with kindness, no matter their background. When her mother died, everything changed. Richard had fallen into silence, locking himself away in his study for days at a time. Then came Victoria, a beautiful, confident woman who appeared at a charity gala one evening and seemed to fill the empty space in his life. To outsiders, their love story looked like a second chance. But to Amelia, it never felt right. There was always something cold in Victoria's smile, something distant in her gaze. Maria, the maid, had been with the family for over a decade. She wasn't just an employee. She was part of the household. Amelia had grown up with her, often sneaking into the kitchen late at night just to talk. Maria would tell her stories from her village, bring her warm tea when she couldn't sleep, and call her Mi Pequeña Estrella, my little star. When Maria was arrested for Richard's murder, Amelia had refused to believe it. But Victoria was quick to assure everyone that justice must be served, that sometimes the people we trust most can betray us. The way she said it still haunted Amelia. In court, Amelia's voice trembled as she recounted the night her father died. She spoke about the faint smell of perfume in the hallway, the one Victoria always wore, the missing security footage from the West Wing, the strange phone call Victoria made an hour before the police arrived. Every detail painted a picture that couldn't be ignored. Still, the prosecution tried to dismiss her words as emotional, unreliable, but the jurors were listening. You could see it in their eyes, the doubt creeping in. Victoria finally rose from her seat. Her calm was unnerving. "Amelia," she said softly, "you're upset. You've been manipulated. You don't know what you're saying." The way she said it felt rehearsed, like a line she practiced 1,000 times in front of a mirror. But Amelia didn't back down. "I know what I saw," she said firmly, her voice breaking but steady enough to pierce the silence. "And I know who my father trusted the most before he died. It wasn't you." A murmur spread through the courtroom. The judge ordered silence again, but the tension only grew thicker. Somewhere in the gallery, a camera clicked. Somewhere outside, the world was already taking sides. Maria's lawyer seized a moment, asking the court for an immediate review of the new testimony. The judge agreed to recess until morning. That meant one thing. The trial wasn't over, and neither was the truth. As Amelia stepped down from the stand, her eyes met Victoria's. For the first time, she saw something flicker behind that cold exterior. Something like fear, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. Victoria simply smiled. A quiet, knowing smile that made Amelia's heart pound. Outside, the storm clouds gathered above the courthouse. Reporters shouted her name, microphones flashing in her face, but Amelia kept walking. Somewhere deep down, she knew this was just the beginning. Her father's death wasn't an accident. It wasn't even about jealousy or inheritance. It was about something far more dangerous, something her father had discovered before he died, something Victoria was desperate to hide. And as the thunder rolled across the sky, Amelia whispered to herself, "I'll prove it." But somewhere in the shadows, unseen and listening, someone else whispered back, "Not if I stop you first." Rain began to fall as Amelia stepped into the back seat of her car. The courthouse lights blurred behind the window, mixing with the flashing cameras outside. Her hands shook slightly as she tried to breathe, the echo of her own words replaying in her head. She had done it. She had finally said what she'd been holding inside for months. But now, she wasn't sure she'd just saved Maria or put herself in danger. Her driver, an older man named Lewis who had worked for her father for years, glanced at her through the rear-view mirror. "You did the right thing, Miss Amelia," he said quietly. His voice was steady, but his eyes told another story. "Fear. Your father would have been proud." Amelia managed a small nod. "Would he?" she whispered. "Because sometimes I wonder if I even knew him at all." The city lights streaked past as they drove through the wet streets. The Hartwell name had always opened doors and drawn attention, but tonight it felt like a target. Every news outlet was already broadcasting her outburst, every headline twisting her words. She knew by morning the world would be divided, some calling her brave, others calling her unstable. But Amelia didn't care anymore. She'd lost her father, her peace, and her trust in everyone she once loved. All she wanted now was the truth. Back at the mansion, the house stood in eerie silence. Once filled with laughter, music, and her father's voice, it now felt like a museum, cold, polished, and lifeless. The marble floors gleamed under the soft lights, reflecting the grand staircase that seemed to go on forever. Her footsteps echoed through the hall as she walked past her father's study door. It was still locked, just as it had been since the night he died. Victoria had claimed it was sealed for legal reasons, but Amelia suspected there was more to it. She paused by the door, resting her hand on the brass handle. The scent of her father's cologne still lingered faintly in the air, woodsy, familiar, and heartbreaking. She remembered sneaking in here as a child, sitting on his lap while he worked, pretending to type on his computer. But now, that room held only secrets. Amelia turned away and climbed the stairs to her room. On the landing, she noticed something strange. The light under Victoria's bedroom door was on. That wasn't unusual by itself, but Victoria never stayed up this late during the trial. She preferred to appear calm, composed, and untouchable. As Amelia reached the top step, the door opened. Victoria stepped out, wearing a silk robe and her usual unreadable expression. "You made quite the scene today," she said softly, almost smiling. Amelia froze. People deserved to know the truth. Victoria tilted her head. "Truth," she repeated, as if testing the word. "Such a fragile thing, isn't it? Everyone believes they own it." "I'm not afraid of you anymore," Amelia said, though her voice trembled slightly. Victoria's smile deepened. "Oh, my dear, you were never supposed to be afraid of me. You were supposed to trust me. But then again, you were always your father's daughter. Too curious for your own good." Something in her tone made Amelia's skin crawl. Victoria's gaze lingered on her for a long, heavy second before she turned and walked back into her room, closing the door behind her. Amelia stood frozen in the hallway, her heart pounding. Later that night, she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her father lying motionless, the sound of sirens in the distance. She sat up in bed and glanced at her phone. There were dozens of missed calls, from journalists, from lawyers, even from distant relatives who suddenly remembered her number. But one message caught her attention. It was from an unknown number. "Be careful what you reveal." He was protecting something. "Room 3C, Riverside Storage." Her heart skipped. She stared at the message, reading it again and again. It was vague, but something about it felt real. Her father had owned several storage units for old business files, but Riverside Storage wasn't one she recognized. Was this the clue he had left behind? By morning, the rain had stopped, but the clouds still hung low over the city. Amelia slipped out quietly, not wanting Victoria to know she was leaving. She wore a cap and simple clothes, anything to avoid being recognized. As she drove toward the address from the message, her mind raced. Who had sent it? How did they know about her father? And what exactly was he protecting? Riverside Storage was located on the edge of town, near the industrial district. The place looked forgotten, rows of metal doors, cracked pavement, and a faded sign swinging in the wind. The office was empty, but the gate was unlocked. Amelia found Unit 3C halfway down the row. Her hands trembled as she lifted the latch and pulled the door open. Inside was darkness, dust, and the faint smell of old paper. She switched on her phone's flashlight and stepped in. Boxes lined the walls, neatly labeled in her father's handwriting. There were files marked with company names she didn't recognize, stacks of old photographs, and a locked metal briefcase sitting on a wooden table. Her pulse quickened. She remembered seeing that briefcase before. It used to sit under her father's desk. He had told her once that it contained everything that matters. She ran her hand along the cold metal, looking for a key. But before she could do anything, she heard a faint noise outside, a soft crunch of gravel. Someone else was there. She froze, turning off the flashlight. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might give her away. The sound grew closer, footsteps, slow and deliberate. Amelia held her breath. Then, suddenly, the footsteps stopped right outside the door. For a few seconds, there was only silence. Then came a whisper, low and cold. "You shouldn't have come here." Her stomach dropped. She didn't recognize the voice. She backed away, bumping into the table. The noise echoed through the small space. Then, just as suddenly as they came, the footsteps retreated. She waited several minutes before stepping outside, but whoever it was had vanished. The parking lot was empty, the wind the only sound left. Amelia locked the unit again and ran back to her car, her hand shaking as she started the engine. Back at the mansion, Victoria was waiting for her. She was standing in the foyer, sipping tea as if she had been expecting her all along. "Busy morning?" she asked casually. Amelia's breath caught. "How did you know I went out?" "Oh, darling, I always know," Victoria said with a faint smile. "It's a mother's instinct." "You're not my mother," Amelia said coldly. Victoria's expression didn't change. "No," she said softly, "but I did love your father, more than you'll ever understand." For a second, Amelia saw something flicker in her eyes again. Not anger, not sadness, but something darker. Something like panic. She didn't respond. She just turned and walked upstairs, clutching her phone tightly. That night, as she sat alone in her room, she opened a message again. Room 3C. The briefcase. The voice outside. Nothing made sense yet, but she knew one thing. The key to her father's death was buried in those files, and someone was willing to do anything to keep her from finding it. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from the same number. This one sent chills down her spine. "You're not safe in that house. Check the study. The code is his birthday." Her father's study, the one that had been locked since the night he died. Amelia's pulse raced. She looked toward the hallway, dimly lit by the moonlight filtering through the curtains. She could almost feel the house watching her, waiting. Downstairs, she heard the faint sound of footsteps again. Slow, measured, moving toward the study. This time, she didn't hesitate. She grabbed a flashlight, slipped on her shoes, and stepped quietly into the dark hall. As she approached the study door, she noticed it was already slightly open. A thin beam of light spilled out from inside. She pushed the door gently, and it creaked, echoing through the quiet house. The air smelled faintly of cigar smoke and dust. Papers were scattered across the desk, as if someone had been there recently. Her eyes landed on a framed photograph on the wall. Her father, smiling with his arm around her. But behind the frame, she noticed something strange. A small metallic panel, half concealed. Amelia reached out and pressed it. A soft click sounded from the floor. A hidden compartment slid open near the desk, revealing a small safe. She leaned closer and entered her father's birthday. The safe unlocked with a faint click. Inside was a single envelope. On it, in her father's handwriting, were 3 words that made her blood run cold. "If anything happens," and before she could open it, the door behind her creaked again. Someone was standing in the shadows, watching her. Amelia froze, the envelope still in her hand. The faint light from the desk lamp threw a long shadow across the floor, stretching toward the doorway where the figure stood. For a split second, she couldn't breathe. The shape was tall, still and silent. "Who's there?" she whispered, her voice trembling. No answer. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She reached for the lamp, ready to swing it if she had to. Then the shadow stepped forward, and she exhaled sharply. It was Louis, her father's driver. His face was pale, his eyes darting nervously around the room. "Miss Amelia," he said in a low voice, closing the door behind him. "You shouldn't be in here. It's not safe." She stared at him, confusion and fear mixing in her chest. "Louis, what are you talking about? How did you get in?" He looked toward the window, as if making sure no one was listening. "Your father trusted me. Before he died, he asked me to watch over you. But there are things you don't know, things that could get you hurt." Amelia held up the envelope. "Did he tell you about this?" Louis's expression darkened. "No, but if he left something behind, it's because he knew someone would come after it. That's what he was afraid of." She opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a folded letter and a small silver key. The letter was written in her father's unmistakable handwriting. "If you're reading this, it means I couldn't stop what's coming. Trust no one, not even those closest to you. The key belongs to what they're after. Keep it safe and find David Calder. He knows the truth." Amelia's eyes filled with tears. David Calder. I remember that name. He used to work for Dad's company years ago, but he disappeared. Louis nodded. "He didn't disappear in Mississippi. He went into hiding. Your father was investigating something. Illegal transfers, secret accounts tied to offshore companies. It wasn't just business competition. Someone inside wanted him gone." She felt a chill crawl up her spine. "You mean?" "Victoria." Louis hesitated, his jaw tightening. All I know is your father started questioning things after he found out about a project under her name. He told me once that he was afraid. He said, if anything happens to me, protect Amelia. That was the last time I saw him alive. Before Amelia could respond, a sound echoed from the hallway, a soft creak, then the unmistakable click of heels on the marble floor. She turned to Lewis, panic flashing in her eyes. She's awake. Lewis whispered quickly, take the letter and the key. Go out through the back garden. I'll stall her. Amelia wanted to argue, but the footsteps were getting closer. She tucked the letter into her pocket, closed the safe, and slipped out through the side door just as Victoria's shadow appeared at the end of the hallway. Outside, the air was cool and heavy with mist. She moved quietly across the garden, her shoes sinking into the damp grass. The mansion loomed behind her, its windows glowing faintly like watchful eyes. She had nowhere else to go, but she knew she couldn't stay there any longer. Whoever her father was trying to protect her from was still inside that house. By the next morning, news of Amelia's disappearance spread across every major network. Reporters camped outside the estate, and Victoria made a calm, emotional statement to the press, claiming her stepdaughter was in shock and needed time to recover. Her voice quivered at just the right moments, her hand dabbing at invisible tears. To the public, she looked like a grieving widow trying to keep her family from falling apart. But Amelia watched it all from a small cafe downtown, her hood pulled low as she scrolled through her phone. The world believed Victoria. They always did. That was her gift. She could lie with elegance. Amelia's phone buzzed again. Another message from the same unknown number. He's waiting for you. Pier 14 tonight. Don't bring anyone. She hesitated. It could be a trap, but it was also her only lead. The key in her pocket felt heavier with every passing minute. As night fell, she made her way to the docks. The air smelled of salt and rain, and the faint hum of ships filled the distance. A man stood near the edge of the pier, his back turned to her. When he looked up, she recognized him immediately from old photos. David Calder, her father's former partner. His hair was grayer now, his face drawn, but his eyes were sharp. "You look just like him," he said quietly. Amelia stepped closer. "My father said you knew the truth about what happened to him." David sighed, glancing around nervously. "Your father uncovered a system, money laundering through fake charities. He thought it was some low-level corruption at first, but it went higher than that. Names he recognized, names he trusted. Victoria's name? He met her eyes. She wasn't alone. There were others, board members, investors. They used your father's company to funnel money. When he found out, he tried to expose them. 2 days later, he was dead." Amelia's heart pounded. "Why didn't you go to the police?" "I did, but the files disappeared. People were paid off. I barely escaped. That's when I left the country." He paused. "Whatever's on that key, it's what your father used to back everything up. Bank statements, recordings, signatures, proof." She pulled out the silver key. "Then where does it fit?" David looked around again, lowering his voice. "There's a data vault beneath one of his old properties. The tech lab downtown, Hartwell Innovations. He built a private server there. If we can access it, we can expose everything." Before Amelia could respond, headlights flashed in the distance. A black SUV rolled slowly down the pier, its windows tinted. David's face went pale. "They found us," he whispered. He grabbed Amelia's arm. "Run." They bolted toward the end of the pier as the SUV doors opened. 2 men stepped out, dressed in dark suits, moving fast. Amelia's heart raced as she followed David through a side gate and into a maze of shipping containers. She could hear footsteps behind them, voices shouting orders. They ducked behind a stack of crates, gasping for air. David handed her a small flash drive. "If anything happens to me, keep this safe. It's a copy of what's on the server." "David, what's going on? Who are these people?" "They work for her," he said. "Victoria doesn't want justice. She wants silence." Before Amelia could reply, the sound of running footsteps grew louder. David motioned for her to go, but she hesitated. Then a shout rang out, and a light swept across containers. Go, Amelia, David urged, pushing her away. She turned and ran, clutching the drive in one hand and the key in the other. She didn't look back, not even when she heard a loud thud echo through the docks. By the time she reached the main road, the night was silent again. The SUV was gone. David was nowhere in sight. She stood there under a flickering streetlight, shaking. Her father's warning now echoed louder than ever. Trust no one. Back at the mansion, Victoria stood in her study. Phone pressed her ear. "It's done," she asked calmly. There was a pause. Then a faint smile curved her lips. Good. Make sure she doesn't find the server. But as she turned toward the window, her expression changed. On her desk sat a photograph. Her and Richard on their wedding day. The glass over it was cracked. She stared at it for a long moment. Her reflection split in two. Down on the street, unseen in the shadows, a figure watched the mansion through binoculars. He was the same man who had whispered outside the storage unit. He spoke softly into a radio. "She still has the key. What do we do?" A voice crackled on the other end. "Wait for my signal. No mistakes this time." And as the mansion lights flickered off one by one, Amelia drove through the city with tears in her eyes, unaware that every move she made was being followed. She didn't know who to trust, who to believe, or how deep the corruption went. All she knew was that the truth her father died for was still out there, and now it was up to her to finish what he started. Amelia hadn't slept in 2 days. The city looked different now, colder, sharper, as if it were watching her. Every shadow felt like it could move, every reflection a set of eyes. She had been hiding in a small motel near the river, curtains drawn, lights off. Her laptop sat open on the desk. The flash drive David had given her plugged in, but the files were encrypted, password protected, locked behind layers of code she couldn't break. She stared at the screen, her father's voice echoing in her head. Trust no one. That phrase haunted her. She wondered if he had known this would happen, that she'd be sitting here alone, hunted, clutching the last piece of his truth. The television in the corner played quietly. Victoria was on the news again, speaking outside the mansion. Her face was pale, her voice trembling just enough to seem sincere. "My stepdaughter is unwell," she told the reporters. "She's confused, grieving, and has fallen into the wrong hands. Please, if anyone sees her, let the authorities know. I just want her home." Amelia clenched her fists. Every word was a lie. She could almost hear the reporters whispering behind the cameras, painting her as unstable, emotional, dangerous. Exactly what Victoria wanted. The public was turning against her. Then came the part that froze her blood. Investigators have confirmed the death of David Calder. Victoria continued, lowering her head. He was found last night near the docks. It's a tragedy. He was helping Amelia, trying to bring her home. Amelia's hand covered her mouth as tears welled up. David was gone. He had risked everything to help her. And now, he was another name in Victoria's growing trail of silence. She turned off the TV and sank onto the floor, her body trembling. For a moment, she wanted to give up, to disappear, to stop running. But then she saw the flash drive again, glinting in the glow from her laptop. She wiped her tears and took a deep breath. "No," she whispered. "Not yet." She knew there was only one place left where she might find answers. The Hartwell Innovations building. Her father's company. His real legacy. And according to David, the private server hidden in the basement lab held everything. The proof that could expose Victoria and whoever was working with her. By the time Amelia reached the building, the city was asleep. The tall glass tower loomed against the cloudy sky, its lights flickering faintly. She parked a few blocks away and walked the rest of the distance. Her hood pulled up. The front doors were locked, but she remembered another way in, the old service entrance her father used when he didn't want attention. The door creaked open with a rusty groan. Inside, the halls were dark, lit only by the soft hum of emergency lights. Dust floated in the air like tiny ghosts. Every step she took echoed down the corridor, a reminder that she was alone. Or at least, she hoped she was. She reached the elevator at the end of the hall and pressed the button for the basement. As the door slid shut, she caught a glimpse of her reflection. Tired eyes, pale skin, determination etched across her face. She barely recognized herself anymore. When the elevator doors opened, she stepped into a corridor lined with glass offices. Most were empty, filled with old monitors and papers. At the end of the hall, a metal door stood slightly ajar. Faint light spilled from within. Amelia's heart pounded as she approached. Inside was a small room with a server rack humming softly against the wall. A security keypad blinked red beside it. She inserted the silver key her father had left her. To her shock, it fit perfectly. The light turned green. The servers came alive, screens flickering on one by one. A password prompt appeared, labeled Project Hartwell Archive. She stared at it, thinking back to everything her father had ever told her. Birthdays, family trips, old jokes. Then she remembered something. Her mother's favorite song, the one her father used as a password for everything back when she was a child. She typed it slowly. Golden skies. The screen flashed. Access granted. For a moment, Amelia couldn't breathe. Dozens of folders appeared, each labeled with names and dates. Offshore accounts, political donations, shell companies. Her father had uncovered something massive, corruption that reached far beyond Victoria. This wasn't just about money. It was about power. She clicked on one of the files. A video recording appeared on screen. Her father's voice filled the room, calm but strained. If you're watching this, it means I didn't make it. Victoria isn't who she says she is. She's been using the company to hide transactions for people who don't want their names exposed. I thought I could stop it, but I was wrong. Amelia, if you find this, trust your instincts. Don't let them win. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She wanted to reach through the screen to tell him she found it, that she hadn't stopped fighting. But then she heard a sound, a faint click, like a door closing somewhere behind her. She turned off the monitor and froze. The light from the hallway flickered. Shadows moved along the wall, slow and deliberate. Someone else was here. Her pulse quickened. She backed toward the server rack, clutching the flash drive tightly. Then she heard a familiar voice. You shouldn't have come here, Amelia. Victoria stepped into the light, dressed in black, her expression unreadable. You're making this harder than it has to be. Amelia's voice trembled. You killed him. You killed my father. Victoria tilted her head slightly, her tone calm and almost pitying. Your father was a brilliant man, but he made mistakes. He trusted the wrong people. He got in too deep into your lies. Amelia snapped. Victoria's lips curved into a faint smile. You think this is about me? Amelia, you have no idea how big this is. Your father tried to play hero. He didn't realize who he was up against. She took a slow step forward. Give me the drive and I can protect you. You'll be safe. I can make this all go away. Amelia shook her head, backing away. You said the same thing to him, didn't you? Before you poisoned him. For the first time, Victoria's expression flickered. A trace of anger crossed her face. You don't understand what he was risking. Everything we built, our name, our legacy, it would have crumbled. He was ready to destroy it all for some ideal of truth. Because it was the truth. Amelia shouted. He died trying to save it. Victoria's calm mask cracked. And now you're going to die trying to do the same. Before Amelia could react, the lights went out. The room plunged into darkness. She heard footsteps, fast, sharp, getting closer. She stumbled backward, her hands searching for the desk. Her phone's flashlight flickered weakly, casting long, broken shadows across the walls. She saw a shape move near the door, Victoria's silhouette, holding something metallic. Amelia's mind raced. She had to get out. She darted toward the opposite side of the room, grabbed the flash drive from the computer, and slipped it into her pocket. The sound of footsteps grew louder, closer. Then a voice whispered near her ear, You shouldn't have followed him, Amelia. She spun around, her flashlight catching a glimpse of Victoria's face, cold, determined, inches away. Amelia pushed past her and ran toward the hallway. The door slammed behind her, the echo ringing down the corridor. The elevator was too far. She turned toward the stairwell, her breath ragged. Every step she took echoed like thunder. Somewhere below, she could still hear Victoria's heels clicking steadily, unhurried, like she knew Amelia had nowhere to go. By the time Amelia reached the ground floor, her lungs burned. She burst through the side exit into the rain-soaked alley. The city was silent, the streets empty. For a moment, she thought she was free, until headlights flashed across the wet pavement. A car engine roared to life. Victoria stepped out of the shadows, soaked but smiling faintly. "You really are your father's daughter," she said, her voice almost admiring. Amelia took a step back, her shoes splashing in puddles. "You won't get away with this." Victoria's smile didn't fade. "I already have." The sound of sirens echoed faintly in the distance, but it was impossible to tell whether they were coming for Amelia or for her. The flash drive felt like fire in her pocket. Somewhere inside, she knew this was a moment her father had warned her about. Rain poured harder, thunder rolling across the city. The two women stood facing each other, the storm raging between them. Truth against power, love against control. And just as Victoria took another step forward, something bright flashed from the street corner. A car door opening, a silhouette stepping into the light, and a voice shouting her name. Amelia turned, heart racing, realizing that everything, the evidence, the lies, the danger, was about to collide in one final moment she might not survive. The courtroom felt smaller that morning, as if the walls themselves were closing in under the weight of what had just been revealed. Reporters had crowded the hallway, their cameras flashing through the glass doors. Inside, the billionaire's daughter, Emily, sat trembling in a witness box, her hands clasped tightly together. Her stepmother, Victoria Hale, sat at the defense table with her lawyer, her face calm, her posture flawless. Too flawless, as if she'd rehearsed every breath. Emily could feel every eye in the room on her. Her father's name, Richard Hale, was whispered over and over like a haunting echo. Once the city's most respected businessman, now the center of a dark mystery. The headlines had painted it as a tragic accident, a sudden death in his study late one night. But Emily's scream in court had changed everything. Her words had shattered the illusion. "My stepmother killed my father, not the maid." Now, with that statement hanging in the air, everyone wanted answers. The maid, Rosa Alvarez, had worked for the Hale family for over 20 years. She was kind, quiet, and loyal, and she'd been arrested only days after Richard's death. The police claimed she was found near the scene, her fingerprint on a glass, her uniform stained with spilled wine. It seemed like an open-and-shut case. But Emily had refused to believe it from the start. She had grown up with Rosa, the woman who tucked her into bed when her mother died, who stayed by her side through every heartbreak and every storm. Rosa was more than a maid. She was family. Victoria, on the other hand, was the opposite. Elegant, beautiful, and cold. She had married Richard just 2 years before his death. People called her the woman who tamed the billionaire. She was 20 years younger, always smiling in public but distant behind closed doors. Emily never trusted her, especially after the way she slowly began to change things around the house. New staff, new security codes, and a strange insistence that Emily stay out of her father's office. After the outburst in court, the judge ordered a short recess. Emily's lawyer, Daniel Carter, pulled her aside, whispering, "You can't just accuse her like that without evidence." But Emily's voice trembled with anger. "I have evidence," she said. "I just haven't shown it yet." That night after court, Emily sat alone in her father's study, the one room that still smelled like his cologne and old books. She ran her fingers along the edges of the desk, remembering how he used to sit there late into the night, reading reports or writing letters. But now there was something different. She noticed a faint scratch mark on the floor beside the desk, something she'd never seen before. Kneeling down, she pressed against the wooden panel, and it gave a little. Behind it, she found a hidden compartment. Inside, there was a small flash drive and a letter addressed to her. Her hands shook as she opened it. Her father's handwriting filled the page. "If you're reading this, it means something's gone wrong. I don't know who I can trust anymore. Be careful who you believe. The danger is closer than you think." Emily's heart pounded. She plugged the flash drive into her laptop, and a folder appeared, dozens of files labeled with dates and names. Among them was one marked Project V. She opened it and found surveillance footage from inside the house. Most of it looked ordinary. Staff moving around, deliveries coming in, dinners and parties. But one clip stood out. It was from the night her father died. The footage showed him sitting alone in his study at 10:47 p.m. Then the door opened. Victoria stepped inside, holding a glass of wine. They spoke briefly, and then the screen flickered. When it came back, Richard was slumped over his desk, motionless. Emily's breath caught in her throat. The timestamp showed 10:53 p.m. The police had said Rosa discovered the body at 11:10. But what happened between those minutes? And why did the footage suddenly glitch? She took the flash drive straight to Daniel the next morning. But when he tried to open the files, half of them were corrupted. Someone tampered with this, he said. But this could change everything. He advised her to stay quiet until they could authenticate it. But that same afternoon, something strange happened. When Emily returned home, the study had been cleaned out. The desk, the books, even the rug, gone. As if someone was trying to erase every trace of what she'd found. That night, a car followed her from the courthouse. She could see its headlights trailing her in the rearview mirror for nearly 10 blocks. When she pulled over near the old bridge, the car slowed but didn't stop. It just lingered there until she drove off again, her heart racing. She didn't tell Daniel. Not yet. In court the next day, Victoria's lawyer presented new evidence. Financial records suggesting Rosa had been secretly paid thousands of dollars by an unknown account. It painted her as greedy, desperate, and possibly guilty. But Emily knew that money wasn't hers. Someone was framing her. Later, in the hallway, Victoria approached Emily. Her smile was soft, almost kind, but her eyes were sharp. "You're young," she said quietly. "You don't understand how this world works. Some truths are better left buried." Emily didn't respond, but her pulse quickened. Victoria leaned closer. "Your father made mistakes. Don't make one too." Then she walked away, leaving Emily frozen in place. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She kept replaying her father's warning in her head. The danger is closer than you think. She began to wonder, what if it wasn't just about his death? What if her father had discovered something even darker, something that involved more than just Victoria? She returned to the hidden compartment again, hoping she'd miss something. And she had. Beneath the false bottom was another envelope, this one sealed with wax. Inside were photocopies of documents, company records, offshore accounts, and one letter addressed to someone named E. Monroe. At the bottom of the page, in her father's handwriting, were the words, "If anything happens to me, Emily must know the truth about Monroe Industries." Emily had never heard the name before. But as she searched online, she realized Monroe Industries was one of her father's oldest business partners, a company that had mysteriously pulled out of a joint deal right before his death. Suddenly, everything began to connect in her mind. Her father's fear, the hidden evidence, the way Victoria had taken control after his death. But before she could dig further, her laptop screen flickered and went black. A message appeared. "Stop looking, Emily." Her breath caught. Someone was watching her. She slammed the lid shut, her heart thudding wildly. The room felt smaller, darker, suffocating. And then, from outside her window, she saw it, the faint reflection of someone standing by the gate, unmoving, watching. The world around her seemed to go silent. Emily whispered her father's words again, as if they might protect her. "The danger is closer than you think." But this time, she finally understood what he meant. Emily's heart raced as she stood by the window, staring at the shadow outside her gate. The figure didn't move for what felt like forever, just stood there, silent, watching. When she finally gathered the courage to flick on the porch light, the figure was gone. Only the sound of rain tapping against the glass remained. She backed away slowly, clutching her father's last letter to her chest. It wasn't just grief anymore that filled her. It was fear, and something stronger than that. Determination. By morning, she had made a decision. She wasn't going to hide anymore. Daniel helped her take the flash drive to a digital forensics expert. someone who could restore the missing footage. The man worked through the day and most of the night. When he finally called him back, his voice was tense. "You need to see this for yourself." On the screen, the footage flickered and cleared. It was the same scene from a night Richard Hale died. The study, the wine, Victoria entering. But now the missing seconds were visible. Emily watched in silence as her stepmother poured something into Richard's glass while his back was turned. He smiled at her, unaware. Moments later, his hand began to shake. He tried to stand but stumbled, clutching his chest. Victoria leaned over him, whispered something no one could hear, and then calmly wiped the rim of the glass with cloth. The same cloth Rosa later used when she cleaned the room. Emily's hands trembled. It was all there, proof that her stepmother had poisoned him, and framed the maid to cover it up. But there was something else. Just before the footage ended, another figure appeared in the corner of the frame. A man in a dark suit, standing halfway in the shadows. His face was blurred, but the shape of his build looked familiar. Daniel paused the video. "Who is that?" Emily leaned closer. Her breath caught when she noticed the ring on the man's hand, the same signet ring her father used to wear, engraved with the Hale family crest. But her father was already on the floor in that moment. "That's impossible," she whispered. The expert zoomed in. The man bent down and took something from Richard's desk, the same flash drive Emily had later found hidden away. He slipped it into his pocket and turned slightly toward the camera. The frame froze. Daniel looked at her. "Emily, that's not your father. That's someone else wearing his ring." Her mind spun. But who? The next morning, Emily brought the restored footage to the courthouse. It was the final day of the trial. The crowd filled every seat, reporters buzzing with anticipation. Victoria looked as calm as ever, dressed in black, her pearl earrings catching the light. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. Emily's lawyer stood and requested to present new evidence. As the footage played, gasps echoed through the courtroom. Victoria's smile slowly vanished, her composure cracking for the first time. She tried to look away, but the image on the screen, her pouring something into the wine, was undeniable. Emily didn't blink once. When the video ended, the judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Hale, would you like to explain this?" Victoria's lawyer stood quickly, objecting, claiming the footage was doctored. But before he could continue, Victoria spoke, her voice shaking. "He was going to ruin everything," she said. The room went still. He was selling the company, the empire he built, to Monroe Industries. He didn't tell anyone, not even me. He said it was for Emily's future, but it would have destroyed everything I worked for. Emily's jaw tightened. "So you killed him?" she asked quietly. Victoria turned toward her, eyes burning. "You think I meant to?" He wouldn't listen. He said I was controlling, that I didn't belong in his world. I just wanted him to stop. "I didn't mean for—" She stopped herself, realizing too late what she confessed. The courtroom erupted. Cameras flashed, voices rose, and the judge called for order. But as the officers moved in to take Victoria into custody, something unexpected happened. Daniel's phone buzzed with a new message. It was from an unknown number. "You shouldn't have shown that video. The deal isn't over." Attached was a still image from the same surveillance footage. The man in the shadows. This time, the image was clearer. Daniel froze. The man wasn't a stranger at all. He was someone Emily knew, her father's longtime business partner, Edward Monroe. Hours later, after the chaos had settled, Emily sat in the empty courtroom, staring at the wooden floor where her father used to stand and testify years ago in corporate hearings. The police had taken Victoria away, but Emily couldn't feel peace. The footage proved her stepmother's guilt, but the mystery of the man in the shadows still haunted her. Daniel approached quietly, placing a folder on the table. "We got confirmation," he said. "The man in the footage, Edward Monroe. He left the country 2 days after your father's death." Emily looked up sharply. "But why would he be there that night?" Daniel opened the folder. Inside were documents, old partnership agreements, emails, and one transfer slip showing millions of dollars wired from a secret Hale Foundation account to Monroe Industries. The day before her father died, her voice dropped. My father didn't plan to sell the company. He was being forced. Daniel nodded slowly. Exactly. He must have discovered something illegal in Monroe's operations and planned to expose it. Victoria was probably manipulated into thinking she had something to lose. Monroe used her, and when your father died, he made sure the blame stayed close enough to her to distract everyone else. Emily's chest tightened. So Monroe killed him? Or made sure he died? Daniel said, either way, he's still out there. That night, Emily returned home for the first time in weeks. The mansion was dark, cold, silent. She walked through the halls, memories flickering like ghosts. Her father's laughter, Rosa humming in the kitchen, the sound of rain on the windows. She stopped by the study, now stripped bare, but on the floor, where she'd once found a hidden compartment, there was something new, a white envelope. Her name was written on it, in handwriting she didn't recognize. Inside was a single photograph, her father shaking hands with Edward Monroe. On the back were 5 words written in pen. He knew, so, do you? Emily's hands trembled. She looked out the window again. The same gate, the same night. And there, just for a moment, she thought she saw a car parked in the distance, headlights off, engine running. Her heart pounded as she whispered into the silence, "It's not over, is it?" The wind outside carried no answer. Only the faint echo of her father's words seemed to linger in the air. The danger is closer than you think. And this time, Emily finally understood. The truth had only just begun to surface. The days that followed felt like a blur for Emily. The courtroom drama had ended. But the chaos that came afterward was almost harder to bear. Reporters filled the streets outside her family's mansion, their questions echoing through the gates. Victoria's confession had made headlines across the country. Billionaire's widow arrested for her husband's death, but Emily knew it wasn't the full truth. The real mastermind, Edward Monroe, was still out there somewhere, and every instinct in her heart told her that her father's story wasn't over until she found him. Rosa was finally released after weeks of wrongful imprisonment. When Emily saw her again, tears filled both their eyes. Rosa looked thinner, older, but her warmth hadn't changed. "I told you," Emily whispered as she hugged her tightly. "I told you I'd clear your name." Rosa smiled faintly, her voice trembling. "You were always your father's daughter, brave, even when the world didn't believe you." That moment brought Emily a kind of peace she hadn't felt in months. She'd saved an innocent woman's life, just as her father would have wanted. But inside, she couldn't rest. Late one night, she sat again in her father's study, or what was left of it. The police had taken the hard drives and security systems for evidence, yet the room still carried a trace of him. She placed her hand on the desk where he used to write, whispering, "I know you were trying to protect me, Dad. I'll finish what you started." Daniel helped her contact an international investigator who specialized in corporate crimes. Together, they traced Edward Monroe's trail across Europe. Private jets, hidden accounts, and shell companies registered under fake names. The pieces began to fit together. Monroe hadn't just wanted Richard Hale's company. He wanted to silence him before he could expose a massive financial cover-up that involved politicians and global investors. Weeks later, a lead came from Switzerland. A bank clerk had recognized Monroe's photo from a news report and reached out confidentially. He'd withdrawn a large sum under an alias, staying at a remote villa by Lake Geneva. Emily didn't hesitate. She boarded a plane the next morning with Daniel and 2 investigators. When they arrived, the air was cold and the lake shimmered like glass on the gray sky. The villa stood alone on a hill, quiet except for the sound of wind against the pines. The investigators went ahead, while Emily waited outside, her breath fogging the air. Then she saw a movement behind the window, a man stepping back. Startled, the front door opened, and there he was, Edward Monroe. He looked older than she remembered from photos, hair grayer, face more lined, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. "You shouldn't have come here," he said evenly. Emily's voice was steady. "You were there the night my father died. I saw you on the footage." Monroe didn't deny it. He looked out over the lake for a long moment before speaking. "Your father was going to destroy everything. He thought he could cleanse the system, expose corruption. But he didn't understand. He was part of it, whether he liked it or not. Emily shook her head. You manipulated him. You used Victoria to finish what you couldn't. Monroe turned back, almost pitying. Victoria was emotional, predictable. She was useful, yes, but your father, he underestimated how deep this went. The investigator stepped closer, ready to arrest him, but Monroe raised his hand slowly. I knew this day would come, he said. That's why I left something behind. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small silver USB drive. Your father wasn't wrong about everything, he continued. This contains everything he tried to expose, names, documents, accounts. But once you open it, you'll understand why he couldn't survive. Emily hesitated, unsure if it was another trap, but Monroe set it down on the railing between them. Take it, he said softly. You'll see that his death wasn't just one man's greed. It was the cost of knowing too much. Before anyone could move, Monroe turned and walked toward the lake. The officers called out, but he didn't stop. He stepped onto a small boat tethered to the dock, started the motor, and drifted away into the fog. By the time they reached the water's edge, he was gone, swallowed by the mist and the quiet. Emily held the drive tightly, her hands shaking. Back in New York, the files were decrypted. They contained hundreds of documents, proof of illegal deals, bribes, and money laundering tied to Monroe Industries and several major firms. Her father had uncovered it all. He had been preparing to turn it over to authorities before he died. Emily turned the evidence over to the FBI. Within weeks, news broke across the world. A massive corruption network dismantled, assets frozen, and warrants issued. Monroe's name topped the list, though he remained missing. But Emily didn't care about revenge anymore. For her, it was about truth and honoring the man her father truly was. Victoria eventually pled guilty to manslaughter after her lawyers struck a plea deal. During her final court appearance, she asked to see Emily. For a moment, Emily almost refused, but something inside her needed closure. In the small visitation room, Victoria sat across from her, looking tired and worn. I was wrong, she said quietly. I thought I was protecting what Richard built, but I was protecting a lie. He loved you more than anything, Emily. Don't ever doubt that. Emily nodded, not with anger, but with a calm she hadn't felt before. I know, she said softly, and that's why I forgive you. When Emily left the courthouse that day, the air felt different, lighter. The cameras still flashed, reporters still shouted questions. But she didn't stop. She just kept walking, her father's words echoing faintly in her mind. The danger is closer than you think. Now she finally understood what he'd meant, that power and greed could destroy even the strongest families if no one stood against it. Months later, Emily reopened her father's foundation under a new name, the Hail Truth Initiative. Its mission was simple, to support whistleblowers and investigative journalists exposing corruption. Rosa became the housekeeper for the new office, insisting she didn't want to retire yet, while Daniel stayed on as her legal advisor and friend. One afternoon, as Emily stood by her father's grave, she laid a single white rose and whispered, I kept my promise. The wind rustled gently through the trees, and for a moment, she thought she could almost hear his voice, calm, proud, and at peace. She turned to leave, and as she walked down the path, her phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. A message popped up on the screen. The truth doesn't end here. Yeah. Emily stopped, staring at it for a long moment. Then a small smile crossed her face. She slipped the phone into her pocket and whispered, Then neither do I. The sun dipped behind the clouds as she walked away, her silhouette fading into the golden light. A daughter who had faced the darkest truth and come out stronger, carrying her father's legacy forward. The story that began with a scream in court had ended not in silence, but in justice, and the quiet strength of one woman who refused to let lies win.